After the dental chew failure, we experienced real heartbreak.
On March 11th at 8:30 a.m., I called into the company. And the guy on the other line, his name was Joe, and he said, Derek, did you not hear about the accident? And I said, what accident? And he said, Matt and Jake were killed on a motorcycle. And he said, Matt and Jake were on their way to work, and a bus pulled out in front of them, and Matt hit the front of the bus and was killed, and Jake hit the back of the bus and was killed on his motorcycle.
And I said, no, Jake Bodeker? And, I was just blown away. I couldn't believe that.
And my first thought was this. Bradley's on the plane. He has no clue. That would have been Bradley's first brother. And so I got on the phone right away, and I drove as fast as I could to the Orlando airport because I knew he'd be landing in a half hour. And when I got to the airport, Bradley and I just hugged.
I was just dumbfounded. It was a very difficult morning.
But I'll never forget Debbie Bodeker saying this one thing. She said, we're not going to let the devil steal what God has started.
I know of a couple of stories where individuals just heard about Matt and Jake and the way they lived. One story in particular, the person gave their life to Christ based on, how they heard about these men, how they lived their lives. It goes back to Romans 8:28, where it talks about God taking all things in our lives and working it to his good. And even something as tragic as an accident like that, you hear these stories that change people's lives. And I believe that that's just one way that God used that accident, was to change other people's lives.
We had a big family. There were three or four main families in the company at one time: the Rosses, the Cassabaums, the Bodekers, and the Adams. And every one of them were affected in some way during that accident.
In the middle of crisis, when everyone is insecure, people will find security in your security. If you will just stand strong, even if in your heart things are crashing down, if you will just stand strong, people will find security in your security.
I think each one of our giftings kind of came out at that time. And I was kind of the funny guy, and I was just trying to ease everybody through this time. But that was really hard. That was hard because so many families got affected in so many different ways.
That whole year, I would say that all of us continued working, but there's a hollowness to life at that point. You keep going through the motions, but the passion really isn't there.
And I think that was one of the key lessons that I learned through Matt and Jake, is life is about letting go. You got to let go of the past to continue on for what God has for you in the future. And whether it's letting go of friendships of someone who died, or letting go the company which you thought you were supposed to build, or your career, you need to learn to let go of these things.
So what that precipitated was us beginning to look at finding the executive team that would take over for us. And so I really do think that God used that moment to maybe prepare our hearts to say, I've been doing this for 24 years. I love it, but maybe I've run my course. Maybe it's time to pass the baton to someone else. I remember the accountants in 2016, they said, you know what? Whatever you're doing back in 2012, you ought to go back and do that, because what you're doing in 2014, 15, and 16, you're missing a key ingredient that you had back then. And I think it was probably maybe passion. When you go through a tragedy like that, you lose your passion of the thing that you were pursuing. There's a famous business author, and he says this. He says, what got you to here won't get you to there. And I think that that's what we realized in 2015 and 16. God had used us to get the company to a level. But what had gotten us to that level wouldn't get us to the next level. And so God used that tragedy to prepare our hearts to bring in a new executive team who could take us to that next level. And in fact, they are. And they have.
By building little by little, we have made a firm foundation for not just this company to continue on, but to support the works throughout the world that it's able to support today.
To have a building like this today and to have a business that's doing the kind of sales and to see all this manufacturing equipment out here and 200 people working, smiling, happy. You know, I thought we were doing well when me and my brothers were running it, but what Landon and his team are doing is just amazing.
To this day, I look back on when I had cancer at 22, and I've asked God a number of times, why did I have cancer? I still don't have an answer. Lord, why did we have an epic failure on treats? I'm certain, to this day, I really believe that God led us to do that. You have to face these big questions of life. What's life about? What am I going to do with my life? Why am I here? What's going to happen to me when I die? And so, yeah, that treat thing, that was an epic failure. It cost us $1 million. I still don't have answers why, but I know this. The story's not done written. There's still more chapters to be written in the story of my life, my children, this company. And so I believe in the providence of God. Therefore, I believe that somehow in my generation, the next generation, or in eternity to come, somehow, at some point, we will look back and we'll say, oh, I get it. Now I know. Actually, that was the kindness of the Lord that those treats failed because it taught you this, and therefore you taught them that. And then when they were in their day 50 years later, boom, something good came of it. Even when the bad happens, somehow God is going to turn this for my good and for his glory.